Welcome to Building Connections and Facilitating Partnerships, Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking in the Middle East and Gulf States. I'm Jason Pope, the Executive Director of the RAIN Collective. I've become interested in this topic over the last several years, having worked with the Salvation Army in the Gulf States, with aftercare projects both in United Arab Emirates as well as in Kuwait. But I've recently switched to become the executive director of the RAIN Collective that is specifically focused on this region and anti-human trafficking.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Edwards, and I'm a steering committee member for the RAIN Collective. I am also a researcher. It's great to join you today, and my interest in this region came after years of travel, and then eventually was deepened through my PhD research in the region on vulnerable migrants and faith-based organizations.
Really excited to take part in the Human Trafficking and Migrant Initiatives virtual summit. We're really thankful for being a part of that, and the lineup that is on for this year. Looking forward to learning from others in this area. So thank you so much for having us.
So the region of Middle East and North Africa is diverse. It is geographically large. It is culturally rich. This map here shows just generally the region, and this is very much where we are building our connections and finding grassroots on the ground collaborators, as well as finding partners that are working within governance and also larger international organizations. One country that's not on the map that we also do consider part of our portfolio is that of Turkey, as it is very much adjacent to this region and serves as an interesting geopolitical space for the connections between Europe and the Middle East.
Our mission at the RAIN Collective is to disrupt the cycle of trafficking in persons in the Middle East and North Africa, and to see restoration and repatriation of previously trafficked persons through funding efforts that advance policy research and planning of key prevention, victim protection, and sustainable restoration programs. Our vision, alongside of everyone else, is to see human trafficking ended in the region. But that is a long-term vision. We know it will take a lot of time, and our mission is really focused in the aftercare arena, as many of the people and organizations that we work with have experience in that area.
So we're going to take the next few minutes of the presentation to take a deep dive into what human trafficking, modern slavery, labor exploitation looks like in the region. Many of us here very much understand what human trafficking is, but every region around the world has some unique differences and some unique challenges that come with the presentation of the problem there. So I'm going to first overview the three different types of trafficking as defined by the Palermo Protocol, and then kind of dive into how we're intersecting with them and how we're seeing them in the region. So first, I chose this kind of graphic representation of overlapping circles because I very much want to stress that many of the individuals in this region are highly vulnerable to multiple forms of trafficking and exploitation within their lifespan or within a particular migration journey. There's a high level of remigration that happens through the region. So very much understand these not as siloed events or experiences, but as things that can unfortunately be happening in the span of a short amount of time or over the span of an individual's life. And so as these three types of trafficking are present, there are two, or at least two other forms of vulnerability that we recognize as being highly related to trafficking, that being human smuggling and the situation of refugees and asylum seekers throughout the region. Individuals, there are many groups and individuals throughout the region that face high levels of vulnerability to any number of these things based off of fleeing conflict or challenges from another region and or once they are indeed in the Middle East. So first, I'm going to take a brief pass over organ trafficking. It is well known both anecdotally on the ground and also in from activism research and a few studies that have been done on an academic level that organ trafficking is a particular concern in the region, particularly in countries such as Egypt and Lebanon, where organs are harvested and where migrants are particularly vulnerable to trafficking, to organ trafficking in those regions. And there's recent questions and queries about how migrants are particularly susceptible to this in Turkey as well. It's also should be noted that trafficked individuals are at risk of being having their organs forcibly removed for the purposes of trafficking those organs because of the exploitative situation that they are in. The next form of trafficking is labor trafficking, and this is really where most of our work focuses on because of the kafala system within the Middle East. I'm going to explain that in a few slides, but labor trafficking is really seen as endemic in the region and one of the highest reasons why the region is so vulnerable to exploitation and trafficking. Very kind of bluntly speaking, there are large migration and trafficking corridors that are between certain parts of the world because there is such a demand for cheap labor in the region. That demand is also coupled with many friends and family and recruitment agencies really pushing the idea of traveling and migrating for increasing economic capacity. The actual process of doing that, there are legal routes to do that through the kafala system, but then even outside of that legal route, which it has the chance of being very exploitative, there are many other forms of irregular migration that result in trafficking for the purpose of getting folks into the region for domestic servanthood and for construction work. Once they are inside the region, many individuals also face domestic trafficking within the country that they're in, particularly with that in the domestic service industry, as households are known to buy and sell different domestic servants using online platforms. And the final form of trafficking that we can see in the region is that for trafficking for sexual exploitation. Again, due to the cultural and social norms of shame and honor culture and the understandings of public and private life, this is an under-researched and underreported aspect of the trafficking. Individuals that are being exploited to conduct research or any type of assessment of understanding.
Dr. Leah, if you could just go back and say your last two sentences, you froze on us.
Oh, apologies. So there are a variety of issues with even conducting research and trying to understand the nature of the problem of trafficking for sexual exploitation in the region, because most sex work or forced prostitution is happening in private establishments indoors. Anecdotally, it is well known that in places like Dubai, there are a wide variety of forms of sexual exploitation happening, but it is not something that is seen in the public eye. Women and/or individuals who are trafficked and/or exploited for the purposes of sex face incredible discrimination based off of their gender identification and/or their race. There's associated practices within the region that also come into the mix of this form of trafficking, with that being forced marriages or mutta marriages, which is where an imam would allow a short-term marriage with a younger girl and an older adult male. And then also the challenges of armed conflict, where militant groups enslave women for the purposes of sexual exploitation. So as when we speak to organizations in the region, particularly about this aspect of trafficking, many come to us with fascinating but very hard stories of understanding how all of these challenges intersect. So moving on, or kind of returning back to the kafala system. So again, remembering those three converging circles where exploitation in terms of trafficking can be overlapping, the kafala system is also a situation where a sponsor, a family, a company in the region has the power to bring in an individual and provide them their visa for their work. And within that process, there's huge power imbalances that are easily had. The sponsor then, with this responsibility of bringing an individual into the region for a job, has complete control of their lives. With simple things like taking their travel documents from them, though they may be providing them accommodation, that accommodation is completely subpar and is potentially either increasing their vulnerability to exploitation and or to not having access to any sort of services. And so within this structure, though it is the legal immigration structure for the region, many folks find themselves in highly exploitative situations. So we'll touch back on this throughout the presentation, but this is the common system that is had within the Gulf, within the Gulf and with the region, all except for the country of Iraq. And then thinking about how trafficking is understood by the different routes, as you can see by this relatively simple map from the UNODC, that the Middle East sits in a very kind of center point of a large kind of nexus of different people groups moving through different parts of the world. And Jason is going to touch on some of the push and pull factors in just a minute. So within the Middle East, there are many different groups, both internally within the region, as well as folks coming from everywhere from Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and even from Central Europe. Over to you, Jason.
So looking at some of the push and pull factors, these points have come mostly from literature regarding Ethiopia and migration to the Gulf states. But anecdotally, a lot of these hold true for other countries where people begin their travels towards the Gulf states. And so we'll mention these to you. If you're interested in the citations, just email us and we can get you some literature to review on this. But the lack of strong governance in source countries, poverty in source countries, role of women in source countries. For example, in Ethiopia, when girls reach the age of 16, they take an exam to see if they can move into higher education. If they do not pass that exam, they often are encouraged by family members, certainly by recruiting agents, to travel to the Gulf states in order to earn funds to send back home, which in many cases help support a brother to continue their education and to hopefully get a career that will help support the family financially. Also, government agents in those situations, local government agents will often help with fake identification cards that changes their age so that they can travel. Just the idea of women as support to help men get education can often be a push factor. Unclear policy enforcement for agents in source countries. Very, very difficult to charge an agent with a crime for human trafficking, to be able to show that an agent actually had the intent for the exploitation that takes place in another location a long ways away from where the agent is operating, without direct ties to a family who may be, or a company owner that may be the perpetrator of that exploitation, is very difficult. So the charges that are able to be brought against agents are lighter, and makes it less risky for agents to operate in negative ways. Also, there are examples of success, people that return to source countries from the Gulf states, and their homes are built with much better materials. Their economic status is heightened among their peers, and while they are not the norm, they are seen as a tangible, visible expression of a migration working for a family. And so many other families are willing to take a risk as a result of what they can see. War or other conflicts in regions also help push people towards migration to the region. From pull factors, wealthy families in Gulf states who need domestic workers or want domestic workers. New construction, like the World Cup, building stadiums and needing construction workers. Promise for exciting career opportunities that agents will bring to people, and the promise of high pay all help pull people towards the region. We often get the question, so how many people are we talking about are in modern slavery, or how many people have experienced human trafficking? And there's no solid numbers on this, and I know that's the case in many places, but I think especially in this region, it's even more cloudy. So we have some anecdotal numbers to start out here. Currently working with a group of women from Sierra Leone who are in Oman, and there are over 300 women there that we've been working with that have been identified as having experienced exploitation. In Qatar, you have an average of 400 to 600 people consistently in deportation center. The government has just built a human trafficking shelter, and know that there are some challenges there, but don't have a victim identification process currently to be able to identify how many people actually have experienced exploitation and should be supported in a different way. So they're working on that process. Sierra Leone organization that we work with there has reported back that they have served 2,500 women and men since 2018 who had migrated to the Gulf states and been trafficked. In Kuwait, we've worked with an organization that has a 25 to 30 bed. It's a home that is consistently used, and several hundred, also there in Kuwait, several hundred people are consistently, or women are consistently at the embassy of the Philippines being supported, and their deportation center in general can average between 300 to 500 people, and all of them extremely vulnerable to experience exploitation. Again, the victim identification process is not really strong in that region, and so we don't know the exact numbers. However, Walk Free Foundation has produced these numbers. They estimated 520,000 people in modern slavery in Arab states, 67% of them in forced labor, 33% in forced marriage, which is only 1% of the global estimate of people in modern slavery. However, every country from that region in their report has an asterisk next to it that says there's a large gap in data collection here. And so we have estimated conservatively, and this number is probably much higher. This average vulnerability score may be something that's more important, the 57 out of 100, which has been estimated based on factors like governance issues, lack of basic needs, inequality, disenfranchised groups, effects of conflict. When you look at those vulnerabilities, they actually rank, Walk Free Foundation ranks the MENA region, the Arab states, actually there's a little bit of difference, but it ranks many of the countries in this region as being the second most vulnerable region in the world. And so when you look at large numbers of people migrating to the region, plus a heightened vulnerability, while we don't have the exact numbers, it does make for a big challenge. Trafficking in persons report pretty much across the region. These are just a couple examples from North Africa, Levant, and then the Gulf states. Lots of tier twos, which does not meet standards, but is making significant efforts to try to meet standards. There are a couple threes, there are a couple ones, being one being meet standards and three being isn't trying. But for the most part, it does not meet standards, and what's making significant efforts. Our core focus areas at the RAIN Collective are advocacy, research, and programs, and they're all linked together. So we want to meet immediate needs through our programs, and also create programs that help make a larger impact, sustainable, deep impact over time. We want to understand and to help others understand the issues as deeply and as effectively as possible. So we're looking at qualitative, longitudinal research, needs mapping, risk assessments for organizations. And we want to amplify survivor voices and help in ways that are effective. And so coming alongside of governments who are willing to work on this issue in the region and to help support their work is a key focus area of ours. We mentioned this Omanda Sierra Leone Repatriation Initiative a couple of times. We in the last 6 months have helped in various ways and with several partners, over 60 people. And as I mentioned, there's 300 people we're trying to help, so there's still more work to be done. But we've helped with plane tickets. We've helped with supporting referrals. We've helped with COVID tests, reintegration packages, just a large variety of pieces along the repatriation pathway in the last 6 months. And then we're also helping to build a resource center in Egypt that will be available for human trafficking survivors at a shelter that's there. That resource center is going to have a setting where people can hang out and socialize and enjoy entertainment, but it's also going to have resources that help explore self-worth and concepts of how to rebuild a life. I just added one story here from one of our cases from Oman, just to pick up on a couple of pieces from within the story. She worked with a recruiter that was paid a fee, and she was going because she was trying to help support her family. Instead, she got a completely different type of situation. She was controlled, had to escape, and then she needed to get back home because she had a sick family member, wasn't allowed. She escaped, and then we were able to help pick up that story and get her all the resources she needed to get back home in order to be with her family. These are the types of things that we're doing to meet immediate need. But I wanted us to dive a bit deeper into some of our research approaches.
Thanks, Jason. So going off of stories like what we just saw there with Georgette, there is a real earnest desire to understand and to delve deeper into the reintegration process. Many individuals are repatriated from the Gulf region because there's once a job contract is ended for whatever reason, there's no other way to switch to a different visa to stay any longer. But after experiencing potentially multiple forms of trauma and abuse in the time that they spent in the region, and then coming back to their home country with potentially family pressures of understanding why they're back, or why the money that was hoped to have the individual to have earned has not been earned, or wide variety of questions like this. There's a lot of interest into understanding survivors' perspectives and the experiences they have in this reintegration process. There are also a handful of fantastic frontline organizations that are working in this space to provide really cooperative, community-based reintegration processes. But that reintegration time period in connection with an organization is a relatively short period of time, and probably the number of years that an individual will walk through to find their feet again in their home country. So for all of those reasons, we at the RAIN Collective are working to develop a qualitative longitudinal study of survivors of trafficking and exploitation upon their return to their home country following time spent in the MENA region. We are very much learning from the Chabdai research project, the Butterfly Reintegration Research, which has successfully completed a study very similar to this in Cambodia. And we're working with the research team to really try to understand what the challenges are, and specifically the methodological challenges are, as well as the ethical challenges of completing a piece of research like this, and definitely for a significant period of time. We're aiming to have a 10-year project with most likely 6 to 7 active years of data collection. We are really strongly leaning into collaborative participatory methods and prioritizing building relationships with local researchers when what will most likely be somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa. We haven't yet determined our exact country focuses. We're still in that process. But really prioritizing building relationships with local researchers and supporting them in their process of doing the interviews. We're hoping to use qualitative interviews that would be semi-structured, as well as an annual survey that would be administered each year to understand various key parts of individuals' lives, how their health status is, the various health challenges that they might be anticipating or experiencing, and how their families are, and different benchmarks that we're hoping to capture for potential for doing some comparison data work. But overall, really taking time over a scope of years to understand how reintegration works and how this information could potentially be fed back into anti-trafficking organizations that are doing this reintegration support work, and how it also affects our and informs our understanding of remigration and the decision-making processes of survivors. As we've already kind of touched on the fact that there's a lot of remigration within this area. So we are in the process of starting this and looking forward to developing it further.
So that is on the longitudinal study. At the same time, we are working on a victim identification tool, which is a screening tool that can be utilized in the time frame of 2 to 5 minutes. So we go from 10 years to 2 to 5 minutes in terms of research here. And in this sense, we're looking for something that, as we've mentioned, across the region, there are likely a large number of survivors who have not been identified as survivors and are treated as having broken the law and are working through the court system and potential deportation process. So we think there's a strong case for utilization of such a tool, but we want to make sure the tool is well grounded in the realities of the region. So we're working with a partner in Uganda, Willow International, to validate, to develop and validate a tool. There are many leaders from across the region have different definitions or applications of definitions around human trafficking. So we want to build a consensus among those leaders as to what questions should be in the tool. And so we're going to use a process that brings together leaders, survivor leaders, non-governmental leaders, government leaders, to help build the tool together and develop a consensus around what the questions should be on the tool. We will pilot the tool with both a group of human trafficking survivors and a group of migrants that have gone from Uganda to the Gulf states to work for domestic work. And so we'll pilot with them and hold some focus groups with them to get feedback on the tool. Some of our goals here is to be able to build a tool that people have faith in and could utilize, and a tool that helps lead us to identifying how to better serve people who are returning from the Gulf states, and how to better support and walk alongside people that are returning. And so we want to provide a space for strong input, and then also testing quantitatively whether that tool is identifying people who we believe have experienced human trafficking, and if that tool is able to identify those who have not experienced human trafficking, so that it has both sensitivity and specificity. So those are the pieces that we're working on in Uganda with a victim identification tool. In conclusion, first off, thank you. Thank you for joining our talk today. And sorry for any technical glitches we have here. We are recording this from two separate areas of the world, and really happy to be able to spend some time with you. If you have an interest in working in this region, or if you're working in this region in some ways and think, hey, maybe there's a potential for collaboration, or if you just want to talk sometime and share what you know and you're learning, like we would love to learn from you, please reach out to us. It doesn't matter what your background is from, like we're looking for partners of all different versions. So we'd love to hear from you. Or if you're not even working in this space and just want to reach out and connect and talk, we're also here for that. So we'd love to hear from you. You can see our website at www.raincollective.org, and you can get in touch with me at raincollectivechair@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and thanks again for your time.